Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Crypto Crunch. Now, when it comes to blockchain technology, there is a wealth of promises and potential that flow from it, far from just cryptocurrency. The medical and biosecurity field is one industry primed to utilize blockchain for storing and sharing critical data. And I speak now with a man who is working at the peak of biometric technology and knows all too well about the potential applications for blockchain in the field. I'm speaking, of course, of Martin Zizi, founder and CEO of Aerendir Mobile. Martin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, to start off, just for our viewers to sort of understand where the scope of the technology stands these days, can you tell us the development of biometric data that can be used to identify individuals, which is moving at a breakneck pace? Can you tell us where that technology stands now and what the sort of current picture looks like?
Well, we are both at an interesting time and a very dangerous time at the same moment, in fact, because a lot in the field is a focus on what. You have this technology A, this technology B, like fingerprint, iris scan, physiology in our case, or whatever. But it's more important to know how than what. The difference between the what and the how is the crux of the matter and the juncture at which we are now. Because too many people criticize the what, and they don't think at the unintended consequence of the how. And if I might take a few minutes, because it's really evident once you hear about it, but it's counterintuitive sometimes. For example, most of the biometry are not totally reliable, not because they're bad, but because you simplify the data to reach a conclusion to be fast. So there is a balance between user satisfaction and friction and efficacy. The best example was the fingerprint. Apple Pay, I'm sorry to mention a brand, but Apple Pay in the past was cracked the week of its release by German hacker, because with the phone, taking a picture, you could reverse engineer the fingerprints. And it was doable also because you don't take the highest resolution image, you just simplified the image to simplify the math. Another problem of how versus what is the use of database. You and I, everyone on the planet, we know we might be hacked or data may be stolen. So for example, you will survive the loss of your bank account, of a credit card, the loss of a PIN number. You lose a few thousand shekels, dollar, whatever currency, but at the end, you haven't lost your livelihood. If you put biometry with personal identifiable information in a database and it's breached massively or if personally and you lose it, the loss is perpetual. No one think about that, but you cannot take a new set of finger. You cannot get a new face. You cannot go on the street corner and say, hey, I've lost this, let's replace it. So you know that biometry is essentially not compatible with database, because if you're lost, you lost forever in the IoT system because you become a second-class citizen. And it's a more fine problem. Most of what we have now in terms of the how it's implemented was used to address border security. You and me, we all are for security. I have no problem that my passport has a picture, that it becomes biometric, and that people takes my fingerprint or my face at the border, because that's security, and we need to build safety and security for the people traveling and even inside countries. But this solution is database linked to enforcement and control. This is the state. But when you go, and it's okay, but does our fridge front door needs to have a database with biometry and my passport photo or my picture linked to Interpol to give me the preemption date of the milk bottle? I guess not. So you see, the use case at the border is not the same as the IoT. On one side, we need security, and it has to be very tight. And whoever traveled to and from Israel know that security is a serious issue. But at the same time, the IoT has to stay open, because otherwise we lose society. I mean, you and I have been raised in a world where we have personal freedom and personal right. They're bonded by national interest, etc. But at the end of the day, I don't think that having absolute social control enabled by technology is the world we want to live into. So that's what I think it's important. Whatever you say in the field of biometry, it's not about the what. The what, we will have many different technologies, some which are better than others, some might fail, some might not fail, but it's the how. And for example, face recognition, iris scan, you can use heartbeat, or what we do it's how we implement that will make it in the end a success for the IoT and a safe place, because security and safety are not synonyms, and we tend to forget that.
Right. So, I mean, so there you have. You've laid out the picture of where the technology stands, what the current concerns are, and things that need to be addressed. But how does blockchain enter the picture? How can that technology be utilized?
Well, as you said in your intro, blockchain is just more than crypto. It's cryptocurrency, but it's the trust protocol. When you split across many thousands and thousands of location, a file that you make hard to change, it becomes essentially immutable because you cannot synchronize the change at all location at all time. So this is a fantastic revolution because it could create an instantaneous trust, as your listener know. Now, there is a problem with the technology. Technology can be technology, and essentially we have two problems, as I wrote in the Forbes paper, that who enters a contract, who enters a negotiation, who proposes something on the blockchain, and who is the recipient. Because at the entrance and the exit of the protocol, we might have problem. What prevents a bot that knows everything there is to know about you, everything, to impersonate you, even including your biometric, and cut a blockchain contract with Israeli or a Californian tech company? Nothing if we don't solve the problem. So that's one of the problems, the in and the out.
And then, I mean, so we've got the in and out, but I mean, you spoke as well about the idea of falling off the system, about the sort of the element of database control that comes with blockchain technology. Can you speak to that point where
Yes.
blockchain might be able to be utilized?
Yes, because if you think of blockchain, some people argue with me because it's good to have a skeptical and healthy debate. And they say, Martin, if we put the personal information in the blockchain protocol, then in the end, you avoid database, but it's on the block, even if it's immutable. So it's readable. So you have to use physiology and life signal, because I think that happens to be my opinion, but I think people might join me in this, that physiology is hard to replicate. And depending how you implement it, you cannot fool it, you cannot fake it. So you and I know that we could, for example, bring back Saddam Hussein to life. I mean, I use that example because of the region, and it will look real. We can even dance a tango with it. But your physiology, your heartbeat, your brain has enough density of information variability linked to your physiology that if you implement it not with statistics, but just, when you do AI, you have two ways of doing it. By statistical analysis and try to imitate, and then machine can spoof it, or by using more refined invariant, you analyze the signal to what is proper to person A and different from person B, or what is common between person A and B. If you do your job better and deep, takes more time, at the end, you cannot be spoofed. And then you can use that also to encrypt. So what I could tell you is that at the same time, physiology could identify you, could help you getting the in and the out of the blockchain protocol and encrypt, while at the same time proving your live person. Because, and I think that begs the question about the bots. Because when you can fake a person, you can also massively attack with bots that are not human actors. And physiology is the frontier between bots and human.
Certainly, it does seem to be the frontier, but looking further ahead, let's say in years ahead when bots are far more advanced than we can possibly conceive of just now. So you write in the article that you wrote for Forbes that states, and I'll quote directly from you, where you stated, no matter how smart and no matter how well coded a know-it-all future AI bot may be, it will never be alive, it will never have a heartbeat. Now, I mean,
yes.
We can obviously get very speculative on this front, but talk us through your thinking with this. Is this not inevitably a concern we're going to have to come to terms with, even if it's not truly a heartbeat, but a replicated one in some way, shape, or form?
Well, that's what I was meaning in my first answer. So let me rephrase and reprecise. It's true that it stems from the fact that you remember CAPTCHA. We used to differentiate human actors from bot actors. You just had to answer a question about distorted messages, etc. It took us time, but the machine couldn't do. But we took all the human behavior and all the successful identification to feed back the machine so that in the end, the machine became more human-like. Because that's underlies the question. The same with visual analysis, the same with everything. So as long as we create a loop, it's like, it's like a weapon race. You create a test or a litmus test to segregate the human from a bot or from a non-human actor. And in the end, because you want the perfect human experience, you feed the non-human machine with human data so that it becomes more human. So we create an infinite loop. Physiology essentially breaks the loop because, as I told you, and I think it's worth rephrasing, when you do AI to replicate a signal, you have two ways to do AI. Either you take millions of signal and you look for statistical analysis. And what is AI? In some implement is learning by statistics. You do big data. And when you learn by statistics, what a machine does to learn and create a code and a profile for a person X, another machine can use it. And for example, you know that face recognition can be fooled by vanilla images to some extent. It's not perfect, but if you can enter a face protected profile at a 20% rate using a vanilla or a standard image that statistically represent a lot of human, you're nowhere. That's your question. Now, why is physiology? Why is the heartbeat and the brain beats that I'm using different, or even the voice for the sake of the argument? Because you can learn not from statistic, but from mistake. Your child, if you have one, doesn't need to learn to walk by being connected to other children and having hundreds and hundreds of minutes of trial. The little girl, little boy falls on the floor a few times, and in a couple of weeks, say, hey, ma, pa, look, I can walk it. And at the end of the day, that's a difference between how we, scientists and developer, train machine by statistical analysis, or are we trained by learning from mistake? And that's what I was trying to say. When you analyze a signal and extract invariant, and then test it while building the profile to see how is the profile solid? How can you learn from your mistake? In the end, it's no longer statistics. And no machine can replicate the signal. And even if it sounds unbelievable, that is the frontier, actually, precisely. When you make a signal, I don't use the raw signal, essentially, for my technology. I use such refined and distant parameters out of the signal that unless you know the math, you know the secret formula, there is no way this side of the galaxy that you could replicate the signal by just statistics. I hope I make myself clear.
Yeah, no, and I think I do understand what you're saying there, but now to deal with the flip side of that equation, and you have touched on this already, but going beyond the how to, okay, we've been able to utilize this physiological information to distinguish us from bots, to be able to provide that security. But then we come to the question, and you did already address this, but I want to hone down in on your point, that issue of privacy, that issue of state control. I mean, obviously, when you hand over this physiological data, you risk handing over masses of biometric information, some identifying information that can be used in a number of ways. I mean, we can look to examples currently, such as in Hong Kong at the moment, where protesters are covering their faces in order to protect certain biometric markers. But, you know, if we have biometric markers that know an identity by the way someone walks, by a heartbeat, by the way their eyes flutter, no matter all these potential mechanisms, does that not risk giving the state and security, and particularly, of course, if this is all on an immutable blockchain forever and eternity, does it not all risk giving a lot of personal data over to the powers of the state and risking a lot of personal identifying information?
I couldn't agree more with you. That's why I built the company, actually. Because if we put everything centralized in database, in readable format, non-encrypted, of course, we give our life away. And the situation in Hong Kong is an obvious example of state control. And the dream of the ultimate cyber dictator becomes true. And you can kiss goodbye an open and free society. I don't want to be blocked to buy a plane ticket because I criticized the dear leader. But that's what happened. I don't want my credit rating to take a hit if I'm too rebellious for what is defined as standard behavior in society. So you're totally right. But at the same time, what I think is important is that when I do neuroscience, when I do neurotech, when I do these neurophysiological fingerprint, I keep everything on device at all time. It's cloudless. That's an essential, and I come back to the how. We have to keep biometry always local. And I could do Claude-less AI at very high performance, but it took time for us to build that on phone and on tablet. If you say Claude-less, you never beam anything, you never share, or you never give the cloud any personal identifiable information. That's first. Second, you can use your physiology both to be recognized and to encrypt. So we're busy building a product for keys on the fly, where your physiology generate either random keys that you can have across the IoT for single spot interaction, or permanent stable keys that encrypt your own key on the device. So there are technological solutions where you shield yourself and you don't share. So if I may summarize, Aerendir future technology, or actually Aerendir technology in the future, a person phone might be pink during an interaction for a sale. And the server, like in dual factor authentication, knowing some of the person's phone number, might say, okay, are you pretend to be? And the phone will just tell the system, at this time T, I'm in the hand of my legitimate owner, but I don't say who the owner is. And when we store information on the blockchain, as you rightfully so, the neurophysiology and the signal analysis can also encrypt. Because if I told you that a neuroprint, so a single neural signature that we tap, is equivalent to 1 million long character password, I think I've said enough about the power of physiology, because it's so entropic, but you can find stability in entropy, that you can have super, super strong password or encryption key. And so, keeping local, using a strong physiologic and personal encryption key are a shield. Do they solve everything? I think if the technology becomes prevalent, we would have made a step in the right direction. But it's up to the individual citizen, you, me, to choose the technology and to force the market. Maybe I'm pushing too far to say, I don't want database. I don't want my identity put online because it's mine. And I cannot lose. I cannot afford to lose myself. Otherwise, I become a cog in the machine. And well, some people might want that, but do we want the Borg? Resistance is futile, you'll be assimilated. That might not be, like you initially said, the world you and I want to live in.
Certainly, it doesn't sound like a world I would want to live in, whether it be Borg, whether it be any other sort of form of unidentifiable, uncontrollable loss of identity. Martin, I would love to continue this conversation for hours. There is so much here clearly to discuss. Unfortunately, we'll have to wrap up here on this critical conversation, something where blockchain is at the cutting edge of helping to change the society and the world in which we live in. Martin Zizi, founder and CEO of Aerendir, I want to thank you so much for coming to speak to us on BLOCKTV, and stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.